Hello and welcome to Freedom and Four Paws, the show where we hear inspiring stories from amazing people travelling the world and living their best life, often with their pets in tow.
From slow mads to digital nomads, house and pet sitters, expats and families with their dogs on the road. In this podcast, find out how travel can truly set you free.
Hi Cooper, we're here again with more adventures in house and pet sitting and travel and digital nomad life. I'm Sarah.
Hello, I'm Cooper, and two of our favourite things in life are travel and animals.
Yes.
More specifically, dogs.
Which is how we came to be the content and community owners for a Facebook group that's all about house and pet sitting, travel and digital nomads. In fact, I think if you look up pet and house sitting, travel and digital nomads, you will find us on there. Or find our page. It is Travel, Live, Learn, and the group is linked from there. And it's Travel, Live, Learn because that's the name of our website, travellivelearn.com, and we are on YouTube as well. So today we wanted to have a bit of a chat about what it's like house sitting in a foreign language destination. So for us, obviously English is our first language. So for us, that's anywhere, I guess, in Europe or South America, Africa, anywhere that's not English speaking first. So we've had some experience traveling in different places, particularly I guess what would be Spanish, French, Italian, Portuguese, and I have to say I take my hat off to Cooper because he is actually the one who's exceptionally good at preparing for these adventures, and he actually does the work. I feel like I'll just fumble through and pick it up as I go, and I don't because I get shy. But I guess I wanted to ask you today, Cooper, about your advice for preparing for traveling in a foreign language destination. But of course, house and pet sitting adds an extra layer of complexity because you've got that responsibility of communicating with homeowners and more importantly, that we're looking after their babies, mostly their fur babies.
I think it's really important before you leave for any destination or any house sit around the world. Like you said, we went to France a couple of times, so always make sure that I download a translate app like Duolingo or Babbel, and I practice the language. And I want to say practice just the key phrases, the basics to get you through, like using your manners, how to find a restaurant, a cafe, a toilet, the police services, but just enough to, once you get to the airport, you can find the bus, jump in a cab and get to where you are staying. So I practice on Babbel or Duolingo. There's a few out there, and they have some great introductory levels there for you with the key phrases to sort of help you when you arrive at a particular place. I also write down key phrases on a piece of paper or I store it on my phone, and they have all, again, the
please, thank you,
how to order a beer, coffee, cafe, etc.
Love it, you said beer first.
Where I'm staying, but that's really, really important. And I use Google Translate a lot as well. That's fantastic. I know it's not one of the best ones, but it does enough to get you by. Google Translate also lets you speak to it, and then it plays it back in the language that you're trying to learn, which worked really well for us. We were staying in France looking after 3 dogs and a bird, and we were quite rural. We were isolated from the nearest village, which is about a 15-20 minute drive. So we had to rely on the hospitality of strangers walking around the street for our interaction with the locals.
They were very French, weren't they?
One day we had a knock on the door. And we're like, oh, we don't know anyone here. So we went to the front door, and there was this gentleman there. It must have been about in his late 80s.
Is it Jean-Luc?
We later found out that Jean-Luc has a farm, and he would drop off the eggs from his chickens to the locals in the area.
Yeah.
And he came to the front door, and we're like, oh, we're house sitting. He didn't speak any English, so I went and grabbed my Google Translate, and I tried to explain to him our situation, but I made it very simple. House sitters, animals, owners, traveling.
And then you had a little laugh together, and
then he sort of looked at me with a curious look. You know when a dog does, and they look at you and they're trying to talk to you?
Cock their head to the side.
But he was very cute and he was very patient with me.
But he came back with more eggs every few days.
So that was very, very important that you make sure that you have some key phrases there to help you get by.
Exactly. I mean, we do try, and you're particularly good. Although there have been, I do recall one particular instance. I think it was around my birthday where you were very proud of yourself for popping off to the bar in Spain and ordering some beers.
Two cervezas?
Yes, but unfortunately, they came back as non-alcoholic, which I know is probably a good thing these days.
Sarah
but it was my
was not
birthday.
impressed.
I was not impressed. But there was a particularly funny time in Portugal.
We found this bar at about 5:30, 6 o'clock in the afternoon. It was Christmas, so it was relatively quiet. And the gentleman behind the bar was quite friendly because when he found out we were Australian, he wanted to chat to us
it's
and learn
quite
about our
cute.
country. His English was quite poor, just like my Portuguese. And so we had a couple of drinks and he was buying us some shots. So we thought, oh, this place is fantastic. And we were getting a bit friendly and happy. And then I asked him, what's that gentleman about 2 seats down from me drinking? Because I couldn't recognize the label on the beer.
Yeah.
Next minute, the barman goes and buys this guy a beer. And I'm thinking, oh, what are you buying a beer for, Dale? And next minute, the guy comes and joins
Don't
us
think
and
the
he
barman
sits
was
down and
buying
goes,
him a
I just
beer.
want to thank you for your for shouting me a beer. And I'm thinking, I wasn't aware I'd shouted you a beer. And we later found out that the barman thought I said to him, hey, do you want to buy that guy a beer for
Not
me?
what
down
is
the
that guy
end of the
drinking?
bar? Not what he was drinking. He turned out to be a lovely fellow. His name was Simon. He was here for a conference in Portugal and he lived in Switzerland.
We
at
went
the
out
time.
for Christmas dinner with him and everything. It was fun. I mean, it ended up being one of those crazy travel nights, but I guess all because, well, you were practicing your Portuguese rather, and while it did go a little bit wrong in that moment, it actually turned out to be for the best.
So I think the important thing is there, practice, practice, practice.
Exactly. But I think, I guess, Cooper, you are the one who does practice along the way, and I'm always really proud of you for that because I do get shy. What are your tips for people, and how do you learn along the way? What do you do to bring your language skills to life in a different country?
So some of my learnings along the way, Sarah, is conversation. You've got to get out there and practice.
I know, it's true.
And I can always order a cappuccino with milk or a beer or lunch or ask for the bill. I can find us a table and a seat. I can find out where the toilet is, how to get us home on a bus or in a taxi. Just the very basic fundamentals that allow you to...
You just try though, which I really appreciate, and that inspires me to try as well. And it doesn't matter if you have a little laugh along the way.
And you
know.
get more confident the more success you have.
Yeah, and I think you're right, people really, really do appreciate when you're trying rather than, I guess, we can come across sometimes, or English speakers across the world can sometimes come across, I guess, a little arrogant when we just expect that it's all English. And all travellers know that never expect it's all English because there's plenty of places in the world where you will not have a scrap of English.
And you'll also find that a lot of these people want to practice their English as well.
Yeah, that's true. So you can have a little language swap. But I think while we do understand and appreciate the funny side of practicing language and the nice side of taking a language and practicing it while you're on the ground, as house and pet sitters, there's a fly. As house and pet sitters, I think we've obviously got that really important critical responsibility to know how to get by in the case of an emergency, which we did have when we were on a house sit in regional France with our beautiful little cat, Lucy.
Lucy was 19 years old and she'd made her way from Canada and she was now living in France. Now, about 4 days into our sit, and we only had contact with the owners sort of every 3 or 4 days because they were doing a cruise. So we had lost
on the other
contact
side of the
with
world
them.
too.
They didn't leave us a number for an emergency if something happened with the animals. And we made contact with the people saying, look, Lucy, the 19-year-old cat, she's having trouble going to the toilet. She had a urinary tract infection. There was blood in her urine. And they said, look, we'll come and get the cat. We'll go and get it put down. And we're like, whoa, like we can't have a cat put down, Dale. How do you tell the owners that their cat's passed away? I said, no. Look,
Yeah,
we'll
we
take
couldn't
it to
do
the
it.
vet. So it was on a Sunday morning. It was like -3 outside. Luckily, the owners let us use their car. So here we are, stressed, a little emotional and worried. Jump in the car, scratching the ice off the windscreen. Sarah's on Google Maps
And
trying
Lucy
to find a
was
location.
upset
Lucy's in a
too.
box on her lap.
And we knew she was really sick by that stage. Like, we didn't know that she had a urinary tract infection. We suspected that she might after a few pieces of evidence. evidence. And we were actually right. And her owner had flagged that. She just mentioned it in passing before she happened to go, but I recognised the symptoms as well. But
and travel time was 40 minutes to the nearest village. I don't know what we would have done if we didn't have transport. There's no public transport.
And we were lucky to find a vet that was
area.
open and that we could get by. I think this is where the important part about having a little smattering of the language, because you had been immersing yourself and doing the best you could with your French, you were able to get by and find someone who was open on a Sunday in the country, basically, and explain that it was an emergency and that we had money to pay as well, and to find this place. And I think it was... Technically, it was 40 minutes away, but on a Sunday, and also Google Maps kept getting lost because we were quite rural.
We'd lose Wi-Fi, and we're quite emotional. I was really scared, thinking, "My goodness, what happens to this cat? So how do we explain that to the others?"
And driving on the other side of the road too, and everything's
freezing,
in French.
Ice on the road. Thankfully, we found this place about an hour later,
Yeah.
and the vet arrived about 15 minutes later. So she takes us inside. She starts speaking to us in French, and we're like, "Oh my goodness!" So we just said the
did
basics,
well.
a la English.
And you had
that was
Google
Spanish,
Translate as
no,
well.
That's not it.
I burst out crying, so Cooper was left on his own.
When you go into the surgery, they have a wall of all the animals.
That
she's
tipped
taking
me over
care
the
of.
edge.
So Sarah starts tearing up. So she's in the corner of Lucy on her lap in a box, sort of getting all emotional. I'm like thinking, okay, so I got our Google Translate, and we managed to sort of strike up a conversation, tell the vet what the problem was with poor old Lucy, and she was able to treat the cat, and the cat did survive.
Yes,
most importantly.
and like all vets, this vet was fantastic too. So again, we got by in our little bit of French with the apps that we had available. So it was pretty amazing that we were able to keep little Lucy alive at that point. So I think house sitting in a foreign language destination, I guess we're not experts in it. We've done it a couple of times. We've traveled to different destinations, but we can tell you for sure the benefits of getting your head around, like you were saying, Cooper, the basics. It's fun. It shows you care. It gives you some more learnings. But ultimately, if you do need to be able to get by in an emergency, it's really important. So I think that probably brings us to our top 5 key tips that we tell people who might be not just visiting a foreign language destination, a destination where they do not speak the language that you speak. It's not their native tongue. So that brings us to our ultimate top tips, or our top 5 tips for house sitting in a foreign language destination. So for us as English speakers, we mean somewhere that doesn't speak English as their native tongue. Might be different for other people. We're not experts, but we have had experience in this space. So where we would begin, top 5 tips that we will give you if you're heading off somewhere to house sit where they do not speak your first language.
Number 1, make sure you have the address of where you are staying written down on your phone.
On a piece of paper too, like keep it with you, because I don't know, I think many people will resonate with the fact that addresses in different places, I would never remember them. They're a totally different format from what we're used to.
How do you pronounce them?
Yeah. So if you get lost and you do not have any evidence of where you're staying,
and we're
that's
staying
kind
in
of scary.
some parts where it's quite rural, and you had no Wi-Fi access. So
I wouldn't know how to explain
having
it.
all this information on your phone, you can't access it. So really important you have it written down on a piece of paper or cardboard and put it in your back wallet.
Number 1. And I guess that's the same if you're traveling too. We'd always, keep the card of the hotel or our Airbnb. But it's the Airbnb is good because you'd usually have that on your phone anyway if you got lost. But absolutely tip number 1, know where you are staying.
Number 2, emergency service phone numbers. Police, doctors, the ambulance.
000, 999, 111. Did you know? I only found this out really late in the game. So apologies to everyone who's watching or listening who's like, oh, Sarah, seriously. When you land in a foreign country, you know how often on your phone you'll get a little text message from the local teleco saying, welcome to Spain or something like that. Apparently right down the bottom of those text messages is the emergency services, whether it's 999 or 111 or whatever you need. That number is at the bottom of those text messages sometimes, but I'm not very good at reading to the end of the line, apparently.
Embarrassing. I didn't know that either.
But yes, know what the number is if there's an emergency.
Yes. Now, tip number 3, make sure you have your key apps downloaded on your phone. Google Translate's really important. And I also make sure I have all my key phrases written on a piece of paper or a bit of cardboard, and I stick it in my back pocket. So just so you know, you use your manners and you can find your way around. Especially importantly, find a toilet or a taxi or a bus on how.
Forgot about the toilet thing. So true. Another important one. So tip number 4, especially if you're house and pet sitting, the big one I always ask is, what do we do if we get locked out? And what do we do if one of the pets is sick? And if you are in a foreign language destination, ensure that you've been given plenty of information or contacts for people who can speak your language, and make sure you know what the plan is if they do not.
Nothing worse, Sarah, if the plumbing goes or a pipe bursts, who do you call?
Yeah, if you need help, you need to know what to do, and you need to know that that's actionable in your native tongue.
And tip number 5, the most important one, practice. Get out there in the local community, immerse yourself, go and say hi to your neighbours and just practice.
Start
Everyone
with
has
please,
a good
thank
old
you.
laugh if you make a mistake. That's half the fun.
I mean, Cooper got really good at practicing in his little, I think, habit that he formed at the bakery in France that went, several times a day. How many chocolate croissants can one person eat in a day?
It started off me just pointing, and then I could start to order them, say thank you, ask them how their morning was, how are the kids. I got to know them by their names.
Sweet.
They were very cute.
So if you do have your own tips and experience, we would love to know about it. Drop us a line on our Facebook group or find us on YouTube and subscribe there. It's Travel, Live, Learn, and subscribe on your favourite podcasting service. Thanks for joining us on the Freedom and Four Paws podcast. This production has been inspired by our awesome Facebook community. Join the group by searching Pets and House Sitting, Travel and Digital Nomads, or find the group via the link on our Facebook page, Travel, Live, Learn.
This podcast is brought to you by TravelLiveLearn.com. Visit the site today to find out more about this podcast, access show notes, and sign up to our mailing list for free house and pet sitting application templates, guides, and a 25% off registration code for Trusted House Sitters.
If you love this content and want more of it, subscribe to the podcast on iTunes or your favourite podcast service. You can find us on YouTube too. Look up Travel, Live, Learn. Until next time, give your pet a pat from us and say yes to that next adventure.